Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be doing finally a tier list for this game. Now before we start with the tier list, I want to say this is actually not that easy to make a tier list simply because the amount of champions there are. And secondly, in this game, the champion rating is hard to give. Number one reason being that they're all very team dependent. In some cases, some champions perform exceptionally well, while in others they would not perform at all. And that is one of the challenge of creating a tier list for this game. For example, if you go to Eric, right? He's a good champion, don't get me wrong, but he's okayish, right? Overall skills is not too much damage coming out of him, and he's good for progression. If you don't have a legendary, of course, this one will carry you through some of the content in the game, but his value really skyrockets if you have a Flora, right? Because he has a 5-hitter ultimate, and Flora really benefits from the multi-hitting ultimates when she ultimates. So it's very hard for me to make a tier list on a standalone basis. So when I give a rating to a champion, keep in mind that it may perform very differently when you put him or her in a different comp. So everything is basically a team dependent game. So I can rate the teams like, oh, this team is the highest on Vortex, this team will do the best here, this team will do best there, but it won't be an accurate reading simply because some people may not have those champions, and there are substitutions for a lot of champions that you can have. So it's a different permutation combination that you have to do to figure out what is the best that you can come up with. So before we actually begin, I will put the link of the tier list that I created for beta. I've completed it for the legendary so far. There are 60 champions that were added, and a lot of them were epics and rares. So I will be adding them, but keep in mind that for epics and rares, those are my opinion based on my experience with the game. Your mileage may completely vary, and that is 100% fine. Don't take my word for it. Don't take any content creator's word on any of the champions that is beloved to you. If you're able to have fun, go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do in this video is going to talk about some of the standalone champions. These are the champions that you particularly don't need a team in, and if you plug them, it's a plug and play champion. You can plug them in any affinity team. It doesn't have to be their affinity, and they will carry your team throughout. And these champions are very few to begin with. So let's go down the list, and there's basically none in fire. If you have a Flora, you still need champions like Eric and Tonalan, which is by far the most free to play team that you can create if you only pull Flora as a legendary. Because Eric is given for free, and Tonalan is an epic which you can get from the starlight crystals, which are the purple dice. So it's a very easy comp to make, but to give Flora a S tier rating would be, she's S tier for PvE, don't get me wrong, but an overall rating would be very hard for me to do. And that's the problem. So if I go here, she's compatible with poison this season, and she doesn't really benefit from any poison champions. You really need wild units in there. You cannot just put her in a team and she will do a lot of damage. It's not going to happen. You really need a team around her. In poison, by far the strongest carry is Ogog. Ogog has a lot of utility in his kit. There are some issues with his kit, but overall he has a lot going on in his kit. Firstly, he's going to remove debuffs from any champion in your team who he heals. So you can place him based on this battle skill. You can place your champion somewhere here and it will heal them. Then he also places an attack penalty too, which is by far the strongest debuff in the game, and without it you cannot run any stage 9 dungeons or any of the harder content of the game. So attack debuff is basically your go-to debuff for a lot of different options. Even in some cases where you think like, oh, I may need healing prohibition there, but the first thing that comes to mind is going to be yeah, I need somebody who will place attack down, buff prohibition, or somebody who remove buffs from the enemy, or somebody who places heal prohibition. They all come secondary, because without attack down you are not going to survive a lot of different content in the game. Then he summons a totem and grants immortality to all allies. This ultimate is actually really strong. It allows you to basically go through some of these challenges where you are challenging an NPC very easier. Without it, some of the challenges that I've faced, I couldn't have done it, to be very honest with you. So he's basically a very hard carry, and his utility, since he's a ranged unit, you can plug and play. So you can just place him in another affinity team and he will still carry you very hard. Next up, S tier champion that I feel like is Uganda, right? Uganda's kit is also pretty loaded. He does all the right things, all the things that you need in a tank, and more even. First off, he will always have an attack penalty 2 on the enemies. Then he's going to be reducing the ultimate energy of a single target. And then he's going to be taunting everybody. So he has control, attack down, and he also has ultimate gauge removal. He also heals himself from the skill. So if you think about it, this is one of the most powerful skills. Like, he's healing, he is taking down the ultimate gauge, he's placing an attack down, and he's controlling. So he's immortal for 10 seconds. And this immortality is very, very strong. So if you go back to Ogog, his immortality only lasts for 5 seconds, which is very fair. You have 20 seconds, some people will have some skill haste. Let's assume that most people will have 18 seconds recharge time. So that still leaves you with a lot of room to play around. 13 seconds to kill the team, that's fine. But so if you apply the same logic, he has some skill haste going on for him, and this is really down to 18, and he's going to have immortality for 10 seconds. So he can be really annoying to deal with in PvP. You really need like a cleanser or somebody to get rid of this attack penalty too. And in some instances, like if you are facing against a very tanky team, somebody has, all the right champions, they don't really even need an affinity bonus, and it can be very challenging to defeat them. So that's why like Uganda is such a popular choice in Arena, because he's placing one of the most important debuff in the game. And it is very hard to counter him. It's not that easy. You can place buff prohibition so he doesn't have immortality, but what are you going to do about this thing? Because if your ranged DPS unit is going to continuously attack him, he's going to be on the front line. You really need to have a cleanse going on. Else is everybody going to have an attack down, and they're not going to do as much damage as you would hope for. So he's another S tier champion in my opinion. The next S tier, if we go to Lightning, does Lightning have any S tier champions? I think Tamar is a notable mention here. She has a very powerful skill, buff prohibition and stunt. But a lot of champions do that where they're AoE control, but she's also bringing an attack down. She can be placed in different teams. So she's going to do direct lightning damage with 30% chance of dispelling one buff. So very good in Grave of Curse and Ancient Battlefield. And she also has buff prohibition, stunt and attack down. So she does a lot in her kit, but her attack down is on a longer cooldown. So the recharge time for this is going to be 12 seconds. So you have a 7-second window of not having any attack down. So you really need it to be landing before the boss's ultimate, because that's where he will usually attack your DPS units. She's still pretty good, really solid champion overall. But yeah, not my favorite. She's close to S, but not really S. The next S tier champion that I'm going to be talking about is Azalea. So Azalea is one of those champions that most people wish they have her, and if people who have her just can't stop using her. I've used her basically in every stage 9 dungeons that I'm able to clear. It's primarily because that she's such a powerful unit. Firstly, like for each debuff, these spells resisted gains 1 stack of Oathkeeper Glory. So it really doesn't matter whether you resist it or not. You can just dispel it and she will get that passive going on. So it's 30% extra healing overall if she's able to max it out. Then it's a really wide range where she heals. I think it's similar to Furbath, but Furbath doesn't heal as much with this skill. She heals all allies within range by 1200% enlightenment and targets max HP. So her max HP she will be healing. So it's a pretty powerful battle skill, and on top of that, her ultimate heals even more and provides a debuff immunity. So a lot of the dungeons like Grave of Venom, or you have Flame Element, you have Ice Elemental Dungeon, you do get placed by a lot of debuffs, and she's one of the best cleansers in the game. And she can be placed into any team and just carry you throughout because her heals are really, really good. And she's an exceptional candidate for that Horn artifact, legendary Horn artifact, which provides damage bonus to your entire team. The next champion that is really solid carry is Mithrasi. So 2 Radiance, 2 Poisoners we have reviewed, and yeah, she is also pretty solid. She provides this immortality and recovery over time to an ally who's about to die. And that can be really, really clutch in some of the dungeons, or if you are playing PvP, this is very toxic to deal with. And she has a very wide area to heal and very strong heal. Like if you think about it, it's 8% HP and 2400% enlightenment. As a battle skill, that's a lot. On top of that, she's the only true resurrector in the game. There are certain champions that will be able to place resurrection on death, but she revives all your dead allies. Nobody else, I think, does that. And not only that, she provides a debuff immunity. This debuff immunity is okayish because if you have a buff prohibition on you, this will not take effect entire thing. So there are ways to counter her, but yeah, it's not like an Azalea heal where she completely cleanses your entire team and then heals. So that means that no buff prohibition or healing prohibition can be placed upon you. They both pair well with each other as well if you're making a tank team, and the invisibility to ranged allies is good because that means this invisibility makes much more sense than Tauren's, because Tauren provides invisibility to everybody, but she only provides invisibility to your ranged units, which is better. Still, invisibility I feel like is a pretty bad buff in my opinion. I never say like, oh, I wish I had invisibility on this. It doesn't do much. If it reduces some incoming damage, it would be really good, but other than that, it's okay. So she's another S tier champion that we have. The next S tier champion, actually notable mentions, is Vinyara. Vinyara can be placed into any team as well, especially in PvE. Her utility is really, really high, and in some of the dungeons she makes it so that you can clear them. Take for example the Ancient Battlefield, which is by far one of the hardest dungeons that you will be farming, and you will be farming that dungeon a lot because ruins are both important, positive and negative. She has an ultimate which dispels all buffs, but the best part about this ultimate is not the frozen or attack penalty is obviously nice, but it's the recharge time. The recharge time being so low means that it can sometimes go twice before the boss takes his ultimate. That is really, really good because that means that you just place her in and she can go twice with some extra skill hits, of course. And she provides a massive shield. This actually is a really, really big shield. And with the defense up, so your lowest ally, or which in this case would mostly be your DPS unit, is going to survive long. And it cannot be controlled. So take for example like the one that I'm farming right now, Ancient Battlefields. Right, just to give you a brief overview, the boss on his first skill is going to stun the furthest ally. So I have placed Vinyara here because her passive will not allow her to be controlled. So I can completely negate one of the boss's skill. And this is a very important dungeon to farm if you're thinking about it. And then she's going to remove all the buffs and everything. So if you think about it, like, she's not having any affinity bonus. This is stage 9 and she's only level 70. And that is the beauty of Vinyara. If for those of you who are not using her, I would strongly suggest you use her. She's really, really powerful. Next up we're gonna go back, and notable mention is Halda. She's really strong in PvE and PvP, but she's mostly a damage dealer. She's not going to be carrying your team that hard, but her passive can still be used. So if you're struggling against somebody who has too much HP, it doesn't work on bosses. That's why I said, like, it's not really S tier in my opinion, but she's still S tier for arena. She's one of the best damage dealers. Her passive, which makes it so that you only need to deal 85% of the damage to the enemy team, is really, really strong. And if you are lucky enough to pull 2 of her, you can get her artifact, which brings it up to 25%, so you only need to deal 75% of the damage. That is very, very, very strong in PvP, but not as great in PvE. She can work in PvE a lot, like something like a goblin. Her passive works in a lot of the elemental dungeons, the waves, she can be used to clear those. So it's a pretty strong champion overall. But the S tier champion in this case is going to be El Cibre. She has a lot going on in her kit as well. She does shields. She has a lot of resists because of her passive. Whatever her accuracy is, it becomes her resist basically. And on top of that, she can heal, defense up, and charm. Charm does not work on the bosses, but it does work on bosses' minions. So in Phoenix, for example, when the boss spawns these 2 little phoenixes, you can basically use her to charm them, and they will attack the boss instead. And the same goes in Venom. In Venom also you have 2 ads which will start attacking the boss with the charmed, and she actually helps you a lot clear a lot of things. But she mostly shines in PvP, and you can basically slide her in any team. You can be using a lightning team, a radiance team, something that she's not pairing up with an affinity. She will still work really, really well because this skill is extremely powerful for PvP. 100% chance of reducing the ultimate energy by 50% once fully scrolled up. That's really, really powerful, and you can charm her as well. You can charm other enemy teams as well. So that's why she's one of the other S tier champions in my opinion. In this case, there are not many champions that are S tier in my opinion. Tauren is a great healer. This is a notable mention, but he has this. His passive is really, really good for tanks. Some people actually commented in my videos when I was reviewing the summon teams that he can work really well with protecting your DPS on the front line as well. If you have somebody like a melee DPS unit. I personally don't like melee units at all. But yeah, he can work. He definitely works with a lot of different things, providing extra HP to and defense to one of your champions is great for survivability. You can pick and choose where you're failing. I personally use him for protecting my tanks in PvP, and he's really, really strong, but not the best ones that I can say like, oh, it's truly S tier, like he can be slid into any team. Yeah, he can be, but his overall kit is lacking to be classified as an S tier. Now, since we are at the end of the video here, I just want to make a quick point about this part. When I say that these champions are only S tier, I am only comparing legendaries to legendaries. I am not comparing them to epics, or I'm not comparing epics to legendaries in my guide as well and in my tier list. The reason being that every legendary is their base stats, their skill sets are all superior to most of the epics. There are some notable epics which are great. So the first one is going to be Tonalalan, and that is only if you have a Flora team. Even if you don't have a Flora team, she still hits very hard. Her passive is really good. She does have attack up on her ultimate, and she does a lot of damage in Vortex. For other bosses, she's hard to work with because of a melee unit. This is a complete S tier champion. It's like if he was a legendary, it would be also pretty good because then you can inspire him. But since epics cannot be inspired, I think it's a basic potential. He's a great champion. He actually heals everybody with 50% defense in wide range, similar to Azalea, but this heal is quite high for an epic. And also he places a very important debuff of attack penalty too. And when dealing damage to enemies under debuff, the hero has 30% chance of healing the ally with the lowest HP. So he brings in a lot of utility in his kit, and it's a notable S tier in my opinion. And another epic that is an S tier in my opinion, not to be compared with legendaries of course, is Voresh. So Voresh heals a lot as well. That's the main thing that he does. The second thing that he's doing is his base attack is pretty high for an epic. And he does both Prohibition, which can be used in Grave of Curse, Ancient Battlefield as well. But it's mainly the healing. It's kind of like a mix between a DPS and a healer, there are not many champions that have that. So he's a pretty good champion overall. Besides that, there are some rares and epics that I haven't reviewed yet. I will be reviewing and posting them in my in the spreadsheet in the link in the description below. So do take a look at that as well. But yeah, thank you for watching the video. Hope you all have an amazing rest of the week. See you all next time.